Yes, welcome back everybody to Market Insights with Linux, and welcome to this new, even though the markets are closed, at least in the US, new market updates. We'll talk about everything you need to know for today, but also the upcoming week. So let's get right into it. We'll start a little bit by talking about the US-EU relationships. Obviously, overnight, at least in my time zone, we received some updates on that. We'll go over some economic data this week. Of course, today it's Memorial Day. So the US markets are closed, but there is, especially from Wednesday to Friday, there's some major news coming out, economic data as well, including also, when we're talking about news, Nvidia earnings. We'll talk about that briefly, and bond yields, all right? Bond yields right now are on the verge of dropping down. It's definitely not said and done yet, and there definitely is still a possibility it will rally a little bit higher before dropping down, but that could be a source of more bullish momentum. So in general, a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. Hope you're all doing great, of course. Make sure you follow the Telegram channel down in the description if you want to be updated on more videos. And general market updates, for example, the economic calendar I already updated earlier this morning, and we yesterday talked a little bit about the potentials of what was going on between the US and the EU. Because as we heard Trump saying yesterday, the 50% tariffs have been pushed back till the beginning of July, and what that has caused is a major spike down and recovery for the S&P 500 pre-market, right? So this is before the US has even traded it, and in general, I mean, this was still bullish, right? If you take a look at this is the S&P 500 E-mini futures, you can see we're still trading above 5,700, which in my opinion is the most important key level. Got a strong reaction there, so this looks good to still go back up to the next all-time highs, which, if we're looking at the bond yields, is certainly something that's possible, but we'll talk about that later. Volatility index, we don't know, and gold is still relatively strong right here. So uncertainty remains, but at least for now it has dropped down a little bit lower. And as you can see, the stock markets and our portfolios, hopefully, are doing well again today. Now, next of all, economic calendar. All right, today, Memorial Day, markets are closed. However, Wednesday until Friday, we have major news, and you need to be aware of that. At this point of time, unfortunately, for July, for June and July, it is expected that we will not get any rate cuts. All right, but so that's unfortunate, but that makes these economic data points even more important, right? Especially when we're talking about Wednesday, when we have the FOMC minutes. That's going to be important, especially now that the Federal Reserve is reviewing its framework on how to tackle inflation and how to keep maximum employment. Very interesting. It's going to be very important as well. Thursday, we have some GDP data and jobless claims data, which matters as well in the light of the tariffs, but also the monetary policy. And then Friday, perhaps the most important data, we have PCE price index data, which is basically inflation rate that the Federal Reserve looks at. If we want to see rate cuts, hopefully in July, this needs to be lower than expected. So throughout the week, I'll keep you updated on that, but now at least you know a little bit more about that. Going back to Wednesday and talking and going away from the economics a little bit, we have Nvidia earnings, all right? This week, earnings are relatively stacked again. On Wednesday, we also have Salesforce, that's quite big. Thursday, we have Costco, and Friday, not much. But Wednesday, Nvidia is going to be major, all right? Nvidia has been one of the strongest stocks, regardless of the pressures in the last, since the recovery, as you can see. And as far as I can see it right now, look, I've spoken about Nvidia last week. Nvidia as a stock is incredibly strong. Nvidia as a company is incredibly strong as well. Analysts have set the earning estimates at very, very high. In my opinion, there's only losing for Nvidia, all right? And only losing for Nvidia, in my opinion, is winning for investors. Like I said, Nvidia as a company is still incredibly strong. And they're releasing and they're developing new chips right now as well to replace the demand in China, for example. So I would say either with earnings that are lower than expected or a sell the news effect, those are the two main opportunities. And then I'm looking mostly for a drop into this area right here between 120 and 115 for buys, all right? And otherwise, I already have Nvidia and we'll just right back up to the all-time highs if we don't see a sell the news effect. But I would say it's a little bit more likely to see a sell-off into support before a continuation for Nvidia specifically. Now, lastly, briefly talking about bond yields, what I saw today is the following. And that is that bond yields are shifting down a bit. Now, to be fair, we don't have the data for today, of course, but Friday we saw them drop down a bit, testing the trend. Now, ultimately, I think bond yields, so these are the 10-year yields, are nearing some major resistance levels towards 4.8, 4.7 cents. As most of you know, bond yields are inversely correlated to the stock markets. So this is definitely something to watch. On the 4-hour time frame, I'm not convinced that we will break the downtrend, but ultimately major resistance levels are coming soon. And at this point of time, even though there's worries for the bond yields to break out and rally higher, I'm not convinced enough to say that that's going to happen. So this and timing it right when we actually find that resistance could be a great tool and could be a great way to actually get a good buy-in on the S&P 500. Definitely something to watch. Also something I'll keep you updated on. All right, so that's what I think you need to know for Monday the 26th for now. If you do have any questions, anything, make sure to let me know down in the comments. I respond to every comment. So let me know. But for now, have a great week. Have a great Monday and take care. Bye.